everyone, welcome to Right by Mia. I'm Mia and this is the recap video for my first short story, Camp. I asked you guys to send me some questions about my process and how I thought about the story, and I want to use this time to share with you my answers to those questions as well as kind of general thoughts about the whole process from my end. So first, inspiration for the story, I want to give a shout out to my fiance Devin. A couple months ago I was trying to think of some story inspiration and he gave me the idea. He said, why don't you write like a family story but write about our future family? And so from there I kind of had the idea of writing about this family, I guess our family in the future, dealing with family issues, which is something I've always liked to write about, and it turned into a really fun narrative and story, and I'm really glad I was able to share it with you all. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into your questions. First question, how did you think about the siblings? Which ones were more like Devin and which ones were more like you? So that's a great question. I don't think I consciously kind of thought of myself and Devin when I was creating, the four siblings, Kenyon, Naomi, Kai, and Andre. But it's funny, as the story went on and as I got to know them better, I really kind of saw both myself and Devin in them, I think, which is really funny. So I would say for Kenyon, he's the oldest, and he definitely, I think, favors Devin a lot, just in his demeanor and how he is. He's very much a born leader. You can kind of tell by the way he sort of assumes, the leadership position while at camp and, kind of over his siblings and his cousin. I think he just has that innate sense of, of leadership within him, and that really comes forth. And I definitely believe Devin has that as well. And for those who know him, I think you would agree. And I think Andre probably comes to mind as a character that maybe favors my demeanor a little bit more. I know he's really young in the story, but I kind of thought of him as like the kind of quieter, like sensitive one. And I think I kind of favor that a bit sometimes. I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert, definitely. And I think some of those qualities came out a bit for the youngest child. He's also the baby of the family, so that could kind of play into that dynamic as well. But as I think now, those two kind of come up in my mind of the siblings that would most favor Devin and myself. Great question. Next question. Describe the camp. How did you think about it, and how did it play a larger part in the story? So it's really funny. My brother and I actually attended a camp just like that when we were younger, in middle school or whatever. And it was just this like massive camp with hundreds of kids, and they had it on a college campus. I believe it was DU. And you kind of go and you're split up into different groups each day and do a bunch of different activities, what I said in the story. And for me, in the story itself, it was very important for the kids to have a place where they could, be kids, and the readers are reminded and, sort of invested in their dynamic as kids and as siblings. Because I think, when you're in a house with your parents, there's a lot of different dynamics and tensions that go on there, which I think, are really explored in the story. But I also wanted readers to have a bit of a break from that and have sort of this other place where it was really joyful and very much more attuned to kids' experiences and what they love. I think that kind of dichotomy was really interesting to explore, and gave the siblings sort of different places to be themselves, which, I thought was very important given how old they all were in the story. So if my brother is watching this, I hope he remembers that camp and can smile a bit at the memories we had there. All right, next question. Though you say in the story that Alicia feels she doesn't belong to the family, there are a lot of instances where she does provide kind of a bit of a missing piece to the siblings. Can you talk about that? Yeah, gosh, let me think about that. It's a good question. I think for me, one of the broader themes I really wanted to explore in this story was the theme of belonging. And I think that theme is very poignant when you're talking about belonging in a family, because sometimes it's assumed if you're of blood with someone or a group of people, then of course you belong to them. Those are your blood family. But for me, it was really interesting to talk about how it felt to not belong and how it felt to be kind of ostracized. And so what I thought I could accomplish with that was by having Alicia feel very much apart from the family, feel like an outsider, but then contrast that with how much she was bringing to the family and forcing the family to kind of look at itself and, give it a different perspective. And so I think having those two different views is really important, because it shows how important belonging is and how it can definitely kind of warp your perspective of how the family dynamics are, how the relationship is, between people. And I wanted just to provide nuance to kind of that overarching theme. So even though Alicia felt like she didn't belong, she did in a way, because she kind of fit into the gaps that the family had that they might not have even known about. So that was, my thinking for her and for what she brought to the family and to the story. And I hope that came through as you guys were reading it. All right, next question. Out of Elijah and Savannah, who is the bad guy? See, now, okay. As a writer, I never really want to have a quote-unquote bad guy, and especially in an instance like this where it's so painful for Alicia to, uncover this truth about, her birth and her parents, especially in this very painful situation. And so I tried not to make it easy to cast blame. I think they're both in the wrong. Obviously, abortion is a very difficult topic, and Elijah to want that and for that to come out and for him to not know how to express that to his daughter. But then on the other hand, Savannah to sort of use that as a way to turn her daughter against her father is also something that's very wrong. And so kind of my goal as a writer for this story and just in general is to never have an easy bad guy, because humans are much more complicated than that, and relationships are more complicated than that, and importantly, families are more complicated than that. So I wasn't expecting people to choose sides, but it's interesting that people kind of want to choose a side. So I'm leaving it up to the readers as to what they thought and how they feel about those two characters. Okay, last question. Hopefully we end on a lighter note. Here we go. What's the suggestion about being successful in Black and how kids are brought up in the household? So this is pretty funny because Devin and I come from pretty different backgrounds. I'm from Colorado, and he is from Houston, so a bit more southern. And for me, on my mom's side, my grandma comes, from the South, so I think there's a bit of that influence there. So for example, in the story, I think one of the kids are leaving the table and then the other one says, she didn't even ask to leave the table. So I feel like for me, when I think of my future family, I think it's just super important to raise your kids right, because I think I was raised that way and so was Devin, of like, you have your manners, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, you ask to leave the table, you pick up after yourself, and success or, financial success, socioeconomic success really shouldn't change that, and you need to instill those values in your children from a young age. So I maybe that was more subconscious as well as conscious, just given how I grew up and how I was raised, and then how Devin was raised. I think for both of us, it was important that was kind of shown, the values of a Black family, no matter how successful, you know, that Black family is. So that was really fun to sort of play with, and very interesting to think of a future me and a future Devin as parents and what that would look like to raise our kids. So that was a really fun element that I enjoyed writing about, and I'm glad you asked about, because it was one of the lighter elements of the story as I was writing. So, you know, again, I really enjoyed writing this story. It's the first one and many that I'm hoping to share with you all, and I encourage you, as I keep going, you know, throughout this series and throughout Write by Mia, that you guys send me your questions, you know, any suggestions for future content. I would love to hear it, and hopefully, you know, we can go from there and give more of me to you. So encourage you all to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for sharing your questions with me. I really enjoyed talking about camp with you, and yeah, it was great. Thanks so much, everyone. Talk to you soon.